Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, March 24th, 2026, and today we are having a tool day. We're going to discuss scythes and hand scythes and if they're worth it, and then we will revisit a few old segments, including which tools you should buy first, weeding gear, and the tools that make it easier from an interview with the great Erin Worrall. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Till Tuesday, your weekly reminder that you can get living soil compost and potting mixes from the bona fide nerds over there at Till Soil. Check out Nathan on the Composter Podcast, Season 4, Episode 3, or head to tillsoil.com to learn more. I hope everyone is doing well this fine Tuesday. Obviously, the voice is still not quite back, but we're getting there slowly but surely. And so we're going to do a hybrid episode, but first we're going to talk a little bit about just what's going on here, which is the temperatures. They are going on. They're going on up and then on down and then on up again. Just kind of how it rolls in March, or so they say. The work is starting to pick up a little bit around here, starting seeds, mowing pathways, potting up plants, getting plants in the ground, and then kind of rinse and repeat. Sometimes literally rinse, lots of rain. It's the spring. That's how it rolls. Definitely one of the more wild times of year to be a farmer because the weather is just all over the place. At least in the summer, you kind of know it's just going to be hot and dry. In the spring, it's anyone's guess. It could be hot, dry. It could be something new, entirely completely novel. Anyway, as we head into the growing season here, or out of the growing season there in the Southern Hemisphere, send your 20-second farm video clips to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. Love to see and share those. All right, so every Tuesday, I like to do a bit of a tool focus. This week, I want to talk about scythes and hand scythes, plus sickles. Although people usually use those terms interchangeably, the difference between a scythe and a sickle is largely shape and goals. Sickles are generally shaped more like an apostrophe, whereas scythes, including hand scythes, are shaped more like a half heart, which is kind of sweet if you think about it. Just, like this. Though scythes and sickles can technically be used to mow or harvest, scythes are typically used for mowing, whereas sickles are typically associated with harvesting. Indeed, you will find sickle harvesting knives out there, and they can be really good for things like lettuces and cabbages, etc. Whereas hand scythes can be a little tricky and, frankly, a little dangerous to harvest with, as the blade sort of points back at the user, which is not ideal. Regular scythes, as in those with long handles called the Scythes, that's what the handle is, that you use standing up, have a lot of variations as well. There are a few different blade and Scythe styles. That's a fun sentence to say. That range from scythes for cutting grass neatly to scythes for hacking down some dang brambles. I think that's the technical terminology there. So anyway, several years ago, I bought a scythe and a hand scythe from an aptly named place called scythesupply.com, which is a great resource, to be honest, and has helpful guides for how to buy all of this stuff for your body and fit your goals. Notably not a sponsor. And I've realized some important things about using these tools in the garden. One, I thought the big scythe I own would come in a lot handier than it actually does for me. It's a great and well-made tool, don't get me wrong. I just don't end up using it very much. For instance, for managing cover crops, I envisioned in certain circumstances I would be able to either, use it to cut a cover crop down to the ground like a sickle bar mower would. That notably looks nothing like a sickle, which I think is not an important note, but is at least an observation. Or simply mow them really high, and then you sort of let the cover crop regrow from there, just replicating like grazing. And to a certain extent, I can do that, but a couple things. One, the scythe is set for my height, like my full height, so mowing up high is just a little bit awkward to hold the whole thing up really high and, like on the back and the shoulders. Mowing the crop, at ground level, although it does take some time, does work. But the thing that is, I guess, easy to overlook with the scythe, it is really meant for taking pretty wide swings. So when you're working on a bed by bed basis, it can be a little bit awkward to keep the scythe from hitting the bed beside you or behind you. Not impossible to do, just it's a little bit awkward, and you're using a lot more muscle to control it when you're doing small sections than you're required to when you're using it on a wide angle because you're swinging so wide that the scythe actually does a lot of the work for you. In that way, there are times when it works, and then there are times when the situation is a little too tight to really feel comfortable using the scythe and not hit the bed on either side of me. A learning curve also exists with this tool where you need a pretty pretty ample amount of time to get used to it and find a good rhythm to make it efficient, but it's kind of hard to find enough work for it for me to do that. Could I be mowing all of my grass and pastures with it to get that practice? Sure, I could, but not really if I also want to have any time to farm or, hang out with my family. And yes, I've definitely seen the videos where someone pairs a scythe against a mower, but do that over multiple acres, and it's just really not a contest. The mower will win every single time unless it, of course, breaks down, but people break down too and need rest, especially, like scything in the heat. I am hopeful I will have more work for it in coming years in places like my orchards. That's been a weird place to manage with mowers because they're, like old garden beds. So they're sort of like mounded, and it's difficult to get a mower in there efficiently, especially for like the lower parts of the mounds. In the garden, however, I'm just not finding a ton of use for the scythe. The hand scythe, however, I find that comes in handy on many occasions, from harvesting ornery corn stalks to killing tomato plants at the end of the season, to even taking down the tomato trellis. I can efficiently cut the twine with that hand scythe. And then also, efficiently cutting the plant from its roots. You do have to be quite careful with both of these tools and keep them sharp, but of course, also well out of the hands of the reach of kids. That's important. My garden is a specific thing though, so I'd be curious to hear how you all have found the use of scythes, hand scythes, sickles, etc. in your gardens. Let us know, and otherwise we're going to take a quick break and keep this tool train moving. Tool. That's like toot, but put an L at the end. I think people probably got that part. I didn't need to explain it. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Grown By. Grow smarter with Grown By, the farmer-owned cooperative. Grown By is the platform for online sales of everything: custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now Grown By supports in-person sales too. With their new app, Grown By Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. Grown By is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. Grown By helps you to put your best food forward. Schedule a demo today at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. All right, back to the show.
Today's first Patreon question comes from Patreon member Gasper Mestas, who writes, quote, "Hello, I am brand new to farming and will attempt to do dry farming. We are on half an acre, but our small house lives in the middle of it. We live in the high desert Southwest. Given a budget of a few $100s, what should I focus on for tools and equipment? I know there was a comprehensive tool video, but I wasn't able to determine the hierarchy of what should come first," end quote. Okay, so great question. And obviously some of this will depend on the scale you would like to grow on and the current condition of the soil and your markets and those sorts of things. But I will give you what I personally would look at first. So I did a show about the parts of a farm to invest in back in December, November. I think it was in the 50s of this show. So whatever that would have been. I'll find it and put it in the show notes. And there's also a thread at the No-Till Growers Forum on this exact subject that will help as well. Those will give you some good guidelines for what to think about when it comes to what you're going to purchase for each specific part of farming. I guess next, you probably need to think about some soil prep stuff. I've often said I could run my farm on a trowel, a good shovel, a rake, a stirrup hoe, and a wheelbarrow, and I pretty much stand by that. I mean, it's not the most efficient, but you could get by pretty far for pretty long that way. And sure, it's nice to have a few tools and options like a broad fork and maybe a tilter and different sizes of and types of hose, a gritter. I love my gritter, but just those few things will get you pretty far to start. For harvest, a knife and some totes is a fine starting point as well. Not sure if you're going to be selling the produce. It sounds like you're starting a farm, but if so, you'll have to think about washing and packing. For washing, staying on the bare minimum front, get a large food safe wash tote and a couple hoses. You will also need a way to dry the produce, so some sort of drying rack as well, either built yourself or prefab, though prefab will likely be more expensive. If you're drying greens, you can convert an old washing machine to a salad spinner or buy one of those hand-cranked ones, but those are less effective and can be more expensive. I've heard of people using mesh food safe bags and spinning those over their heads, literally just like a sling to dry the greens as a lo-fi solution. I have never tried that, but for a small amount of greens, sure. For 50 or 100 pounds, that would be a lot of work. It'd be a lot of spinning. you'd get really strong, but it'd be a lot of spending. For cooling, on a small scale, you can get pretty far with a large refrigerator or two, or buy a CoolBot and AC unit and just shove them in an unused closet or something, or just freeze bottles of water and use those to cool off large hunting coolers. Like we have these large coolers that we bring to market, and we just use frozen water bottles in there to kind of keep them cool through the day. Now, if you do plan to sell, you'll need to think about not only what you plan to pack the vegetables into, but marketing equipment as well. So like tents and tables, etc. You will need a scale also. Tools and equipment wise, that's a good list to start with. Obviously, there are things like seeders and mowing equipment that you'll need. Any sort of seed starting stuff, that just depending on if you want to buy your plants to start or if you want to start them yourself. I really recommend going through that post at the forum and kind of just taking notes as you go to each individual part of farming. So yeah, tools and equipment wise, that's a pretty good list to start with. As you can see, it's unfortunately not as simple as just buy these few things, because like I've said before, starting a farm is like not just starting a business, but starting a business that also produces the raw ingredients for what it sells, which most businesses do not begin there. I mean, many businesses don't ever get there. Most businesses outsource their sort of widget production, buying in things they need to make their product. Not us. We grow the widgets. We do it all. Everything from production to marketing. Farming is a bonkers business in that way. Again, I know I harp on these things a lot, but there is no easy way to break into this business with no or low capital. But it is, it's possible. It's just a lot of work. We did it. It sucked, but it definitely can be done if you're willing to put the energy into it and willing to start somewhere low and have a goal of what you need each step along the way. Now, if you're just trying to garden and maybe slowly move into farming, you can totally do it for pretty cheap and slowly acquire more as you grow. I also cannot emphasize enough how valuable it is to just do an enterprise budget and write out the crops you want to grow, like each crop that you're planning to grow, and then what you will need for each of those and how much it will cost both upfront and annually to produce each one individually and then all of them together. Treat the farm like a business, because that is exactly what it is, even if it is also, so much more than that. Great question and best of luck. I hope I was at least a little bit helpful. Our final Patreon question of the day comes to us from Alex Leidy, who asks, "Hey there, I've been tuning into Growers Daily Podcast and thoroughly enjoying it. It's weeding season, so I have a question. Any opinions on weeding knives? I have been working with some migrant workers that are exceptional growers, and they love to use fixed blade knives for weeding around sensitive crops like garlic, berries, celery, etc., using the knife to pry deeply rooted established weeds and then scrape the surface of the soil to kill smaller weeds. Though I have 10 years of growing experience, this is new to me. Though it's slightly time consuming, the bed comes out really nice. In general, what is your weeding gear, and do you ever incorporate knives?" End quote. All right, that's a super fun question here, Alex. And obviously, my preferred weeding gear is mulch, but the truth is that I still have plenty of places on the farm that occasionally need cultivation because I try a lot of different low and no mulch sort of techniques, so I have a lot of experience to advise people who don't have access to a lot of mulch. And sometimes I fail to mow my living pathways in time to make sure life is never dull. But I also have years of experience working on a tillage farm, so I have no shortage of cultivation hours logged and thoughts on the subject. So I will do a total weeding tool rundown and then focus a bit more on your specific question. The first thing I will say is that my favorite weeding tool is a syrup hoe, sometimes called a hula hoe. I want to do as much of my weeding standing up as humanly possible, as I'm sure you do. Think of this tool like a swinging blade, like a hoop almost, on the bottom of a long handle that can go forward and backward to cultivate while keeping your back straight. I used to use a collinear hoe for years, but on the advice of several growers of the time, but the stirrup hoe is just significantly more efficient with less work in my experience. The one trade-off is that the stirrup hoe is sharper and will kill more plants if you goof, like if you just hit a rock and then just accidentally slam into that plant, it is gone. Which is probably why these workers are carefully weeding up against the plant with knives, but we'll get to that. For the pathways, again, if mulch is not the option, things like a wheel hoe are probably the most efficient, though that is a ton of work on your shoulders. I generally use a large stirrup hoe, but for larger market gardens, that's going to be inadequate. The wheel hoe, and then the next step up would be like the tractor cultivators. That's really going to be the best thing for your pathways. For digging up rooted perennials, like you were talking about with a knife, I have a nice trowel from Johnny's that I love, but I have also used our harvest knife. I have an old harvest knife that I'll talk about in a second, but usually I like to bust out that trowel if I have the time. Alex wrote a reply to this question that they said they picked up a hori, which is also a really good option. It's just kind of a sort of like a trowel, but like a knifey trowel. If it's a really big plant, like a well-established, dock root or something, then a spade shovel is the ticket for me. I have a really nice spade from Ace of Spades, I think is what it's called. I do have a pocket knife for a farmer. That's a tool that is common as a hat, I guess, but I do not use it in the dirt so much. But I will use one of our old harvest knives around plants as well. Not always, because you said it's kind of time consuming to do that, but in terms of accuracy, especially with like sensitive plants or plants that are high value and very long lived, that's the way to go. And I'll bet there are better knives than what I use. I just kind of use that old harvest knife because it's around. Alex also wrote in that follow-up, quote, I have settled on a butcher's skinning and ribbing knife with around a 5-inch blade for smaller weeds. It has a unique shape that is great for cutting under just the soil surface. Those two knives live in the same sheath. Because soil dulls blades so quickly, I quickly touch them up daily. For the same reason, I keep a third knife strictly for harvest that never touches the dirt. We, of course, use standard implements in the field with larger crops. I should say that I am mostly using knives in our house where we interplant and space tight, end quote. And yeah, that was my thought. I wouldn't use the pocket knife for soil work because the dirt would absolutely dull it. But I can definitely see in a tight sort of spacing or in an interplant, like you said, how a small precision cultivation tool like a knife comes in really, really handy. Although absolutely, I prefer to take care of weeds with mulch, tarps, and occasional flame weeder maybe. There are also just an unending number of cultivation tools out there that have come up in the last decade, from tine rake weeders and various rolling cultivators that gently weed in and around plants that could be explored on larger scales. There are also tractor implements like finger weeders. As you get into larger and larger scales, weeds do happen. So it's good to have an array of tools in this time it's kind of the literal toolbox to help out. I mean, I certainly wouldn't recommend, and I'm sure Alex agrees with this, using like that boning knife, for instance, on a large scale, but around a handful of precious plants, it's certainly effective. Anyway, that's my go-to cultivating tool setup and my thoughts on cultivation tools in general. What say you?
Today's episode is brought to you by Good Agriculture. If you'd rather be on the farm than inside doing your taxes, you are not alone. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping and tax filing, so there is no scrambling at tax time. They keep your books clean and up to date and show you where your farm's finances stand. If you're behind, they'll get you caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show.
All right, so Erin, when you're farming solo, you have to be obviously like really smart about your time and efficiency. So I'm curious, tool-wise, what are some things that have been super helpful for that? Some of the things that have like done the trick for you in that department, and maybe some that you kind of wish you had.
Yeah, the most obvious, easiest answer for me is the Jang seeder. I did not have it my first year of production, and I hand seeded every single thing that went into the field, every carrot, every radish. And it would take me a couple of hours to plant a single bed of carrots because I didn't want to have to come back and thin it. So I was spacing them out. And then I invested in the Jang year 2, and I literally cried the first time that I planted a bed of carrots in like 4 minutes. I couldn't believe how much time I had wasted doing that. So I think for me, the seeder has been far and away the biggest time saver, most efficient thing. I also think this is not entirely a tool, but my high tunnels, I mean, they made such a difference in the productivity of the farm. They cut down on pest pressure. I do a better job keeping things weeded because they're just like mentally in their own space. And I was able to, I built kind of a DIY one second year, but I've been fortunate enough to have an NRCS grant every year since. I'm up to 5 tunnels now. And I would say doing it by myself, it was incredible to have these like smaller pockets of space to mentally manage. But also now that I have employees, that's an efficiency and kind of an organization of the farm that has helped a ton. Because you can do everything from like trellis your cukes and your tomatoes better than you can in the field to throwing up exclusionary netting on certain crops. It's really been a huge labor and time saver for me to have these like enclosed growing areas.
Yeah. There's so many benefits to it, and it just makes so many things easier. Is there anything that you're thinking now that you would really like to have, or maybe even have somebody invent? What's missing on your farm right now in terms of tools?
I think they're invented, but what's missing for me is a better, more efficient wash pack setup. That's something that I am still sort of bootstrapping and can waste a lot of time and feel just sort of obnoxious to do when you don't feel like you have the right tools. So things like a root washer rather than hand spraying every bunch of carrots with the hose would be so lovely. A bigger, salad greens bubbler, stuff that can just move things in faster quantities. Those are the things I could really start to benefit from.
Yeah, I think that's an area that's really easy to have bottlenecks.
Yeah.
Because I think it gets under designed for for all of us, because you're like, I need to grow food. I can figure the rest out later, because that's what I did. That's what we did. Right. Yeah. And then you get it to the wash pack and you're like, all right, well, at first I'm just going to use these buckets that I have. And then you buy like a hand spinner for your salad mix, whatever. But that becomes a very significant portion of your time is spent just literally washing and packing things. Yeah.
It also makes such a huge, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It also just makes such a huge difference in the quality of your product. Like the length of time that your salad mix can last is greatly impacted by how well you processed it. And that comes down to like customer satisfaction. It really does matter a lot.
One question I had in regards to the Jang, you mentioned that being like just, completely a game changer for you. Did you anywhere in that period try the Earthway either? Because I get this question a lot, like, is the Jang a necessity over the Earthway, or you just kind of went straight to the Jang?
I went straight to the Jang. People ask me that question all the time too. I have never used another seeder. I just heard enough experienced growers that I really admired their operation saying this is the one that you're going to wish that you had and it's worth it. And so rather than kind of making this smaller investment before working my way up, I was like, I'm just going to do what I want at the beginning.
Yeah. It's funny because your story of going from like hand seeding to, crying, pushing the Jang, it rings like that's the story I'm always telling people that I didn't necessarily go directly from, because when I started learning how to farm, I had, the farmer that I was working for had the Earthway and stuff. So I kind of had experience with that. And then I definitely could see how much better or more, efficient, more easier to push, all those things that the Jang was than the Earthway. But I didn't have necessarily that experience of going from like literally hand seeding a bed of carrots to pushing the Jang through, which would have been incredible. So yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to have that anecdote to be able to tell people, but also like there are tools like that and in that you experience, like you're going through something, you're cultivating or you're seeding or whatever, and it's very slow. And there are tools that can improve that process, but there is some value to having gone through it the hard way to begin with, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought of one other thing that I would love to have.
Sure.
When I'm thinking about, so philosophically, right, when you're farming solo, so much of your farm can just become your life. And I think as I've become a healthier person who is also a farmer, who also farms at my home, it's been as my mind has changed about like separating my farm business from me as an individual and like creating some distinction there. And so one thing that I'm working on this year is moving my farm transport out of my personal vehicle. And so I would say like some kind of van or trailer or something that belongs to the farm business. And I don't have to unload like all of my market tables and signage and packaging and everything out of my car so I can drive my kids to soccer, like every week. That is such a mental slog for me. And it feels like it's encroaching at all times. There's microgreen seeds all over the floor of the van because I've spilled so many trays in there. And so, yes, that's one thing that's missing that I think will make a really big difference to me just in quality of life and like mental sustainability.
That's an interesting one. One, I appreciate that you're taking them to soccer. But two, I think people maybe don't realize that you can get a loan for, like, we got ours through Ag Credit for a Honda Odyssey that we used for the van, just exclusively for the farm, because that was the perfect fit for us for the amount of produce we were taking. we could fit about $2,000 worth of produce in one of those vans because they're so well designed, and you just take out the seats or whatever. And they run forever. So it turned out that we were able to get that loan for like basically a family van through the ag credit to be able to use for the farm, which, you know, I don't know. Some people probably think about van. I don't know what kind of van you got. And some people may think, oh, I need a Sprinter. I need one of these, you know, like larger whatever vans. And I think maybe eventually a lot of people will. But, you know, there is also that option of getting like low interest loans for, I don't know, smaller vehicles like that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth it to be able to have something that can like stay farm use and not have to transition every week back and forth to make your personal life possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Really appreciate your patience on the voice, as always. It is getting better. It feels great. It just doesn't sound quite there yet. Thank you all. Don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and also my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Cheers. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of March. But we're going to hold off on shout outs until I can do a full episode and do a full story. So stay tuned for that. And thank you all so much. Much love. See you tomorrow. Bye.
One of the biggest challenges of earning a degree as a military veteran is transitioning your goals and experiences to your next phase in life. National University gets it. As a veteran-founded Yellow Ribbon School, they offer post-9/11 GI Bill acceptance, dedicated military support and advising services, and credit for your military experience. That's why 30% of their students are military affiliated. NU, education that serves those who served.